between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, and what to expect from this Raiders offense. If you heard us in the last segment, we think the Raiders are a candidate to score the fewest points in the NFL this upcoming season. Then 30 minutes from now, Jonathan Von Tobel, our VSiN senior NBA analyst, will join us as it's a big week in the association, the NBA draft, and also we continue to look towards free agency. What are Michael's Sixers going to do in free agency? We'll ask JVT that. I know, hey, it pains you, but they're going to be a story. They're going to be a storyline this free agency period, so we got to ask our guy JVT about it. But Michael, let's start with the poll that you put up on Twitter at @MLombardiNFL. We encourage everyone to go ahead and vote in it. You still have 12 hours left, but it's a pretty simple question. Which underdog to start week 1 at DraftKings Sportsbook will win the job this offseason? Which quarterback? And right now, the favorite is none of them. We have 3 quarterbacks, Aiden O'Connell, J.J. McCarthy, Drake May, but right now none of them leads the poll with 30%, McCarthy 25%, Drake May just behind him at 24%, then Aiden O'Connell is at 19% right now. Once again, the voting is still open at @MLombardiNFL, but I kind of agree with this, Michael. The none of them is where I would go, and that's where I voted.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that too, because let's just break it down, right? Drake May's not ready to play. They drafted Drake May with the eye on 25, not 24. And they signed Jacoby Brissett to an $8 million a year contract in New England to give Drake May a breather. Now, does that mean he's not going to play? No, but it's not September. It's way too early for him to play in September. So I think that situation, same thing with J.J. McCarthy. They kind of mirror itself. Minnesota, New England mirror itself in how they've approached the offseason. Signed Darnold to get them through a year, and then J.J. McCarthy is going to be involved in the 25 season. And the only one really can Aiden O'Connell beat out Gardner Minshew. And if you just watch Aiden O'Connell last year, I know that we'll talk to Vinnie in the next block. I know that Antonio Pierce said he deserves the right to be the starter, to have a chance to become the starter. But I didn't see that last year. I mean, they couldn't move the ball against Minnesota. If they beat Minnesota, it's a 3-0 game, right? They didn't complete a pass in the win on Christmas Day after the first quarter. So, this is not something that's just going to happen. He's been good in the preseason, but how many times have we been fooled by guys in the preseason? Sam Ehlinger. I mean, the Colts actually thought they had somebody as a starting quarterback. Remember, they went into New England with Ehlinger as the starter, and they got shut out because they actually thought he was good in the preseason. It's the same thing that the Raiders did with O'Connell. He was great in the preseason. They put him in a game against the Chargers, and they couldn't even complete a pass. So I think this is a long road. I think it's Gardner Minshew's job easily. So I think none of the above is the right answer.
So you think it's Minshew's job easily? Because I would say that, I think that there's at least a legit competition, and Minshew will probably win it, but maybe O'Connell has a chance if it's neck and neck?
No, I think, look, the Raiders are we got to get the ball to Davante Adams. They just redid Davante Adams' contract this offseason to make him happy. They got to get the ball to him, and Minshew can get the ball to him. I mean, that's their best chance. Now, Minshew has a hard time if he gets pressure inside, but Minshew can play well enough in 4 or 5 games in a row to make him look like the Raiders are going to be a good offensive team. But then he hits the wall and he makes some bad throws, and the more he gets hit, the less effective he becomes because he's not a big man and he wears his body down. So I think it's easily Minshew can come in and execute. Look, Aiden O'Connell, I mean, it was preseason. It's cover 1, it's cover 3. When it starts moving fast, like we saw, look, you can't move the ball against Minnesota. Brian Flores moving people around, right? Steve Spagnuolo's defense in Kansas City moving people around. That's a telltale sign.
So how about one it's not on the poll, but I do want to throw this before we get to what's on Michael's mind. The New York Giants quarterback competition, at least on the outside, they're saying it's not a competition, it's Daniel Jones' job. Minus 425 to take the first snap week 1. Drew Lock plus 275. Anything there,
no
or
chance.
Is this you think it's Jones?
They did not give Daniel Jones all this money. I mean, you got people on Twitter defending Daniel Jones as if he was Trevor Lawrence. Have you seen that? People will put Daniel Jones' stats up to Trevor Lawrence's to justify the horrendous contract. 2 wrongs, my mother used to tell me this all the time. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Just because the Giants paid Jones doesn't mean that Lawrence is better off. Look, Lawrence has better potential, but they both have issues. They both can't throw the ball down the field. So I think, to me, there's under penalty of death. There's no way it's just an open competition. There's no way that Brian Daboll's walking into John Mara's office and saying, "Hey, I'm going to start Drew Lock in this game over a healthy Daniel Jones." There's just no way that's happening. No way. No way.
All right, because I felt that there was maybe an avenue for Drew Lock to potentially get onto the field, but maybe it's later on down. Maybe Jones would have to play poorly, and then it's a desperation move at some point.
Femi, they've been covering up for Daniel Jones for 4 years. They make up every time. I mean, they're like the Warren Commission when it comes to Daniel Jones. They have a reason for something, even though it makes no sense at all. They'll have a reason for it. Well, he doesn't get protected. He got better when he runs. I mean, it's all, it's not hard to see that Daniel Jones isn't a starting caliber quarterback at a high level. Can he go in and start? No question. Could he have an effective game? At times. Can he throw the ball down the field and hold it? No. Never averaged over 7 yards per attempt in his career. How many more games do you need from Daniel Jones to not know who he is? And they still paid him. They won 9 games 2 years ago, and they thought it was him that won the games, and it wasn't. They managed the games correctly. They had a really good schedule, and they kind of sputtered out at the end. They got fortunate to win. They beat Houston, a bad team, fortunately, because Davis Mills turned them over in the second half. Houston didn't punt in the second half of that year of that game, and they still lost because they turned it over. So, look, they have every excuse known to man. They're not going to let Daniel Jones not succeed in that at all.
Yeah, well, I guess they also did work on a lot of these quarterbacks, though. Like they brought Russell Wilson in. They did work on some of those guys. I mean, maybe they were looking to at least replace him, but I guess.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is going to come down to, look, we'll see when they put out. I mean, I'm sure the cover up is going to be in place. But we never wanted a quarterback. My point is, when you say you never wanted a quarterback, what evidence do you have that you have a quarterback? People take this as a knock. Well, we don't have a we can't admit we don't have a quarterback. You should admit it. You don't have one.
Yeah.
You don't have one.
Yeah. Set realistic expectations. But the Giants, I guess, are going to continue to go down this path. And to that, I say good luck. Let's get to what's on Michael's mind. What do you think about this morning? What's top of brain?
Well, I had a laugh when I read that Kelly Stafford, dated the backup quarterback at Georgia just to make Matthew Stafford mad. And she did. And he got mad and they got married. But I think, to me, this is Stafford Inc. There's no question Kelly's tremendously involved in his career. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure she's probably not happy that all these other quarterbacks are getting paid. And I think, to me, what's on my mind is, what do the Rams do with Matthew Stafford's contract? Because I think Kelly shows you how determined she is to go after her man, right? I mean, I think this whole story is I'm going to protect mine. I know what I want, and I'm going to get it, right? And so good for her. God bless her, right? I'm not sure the backup quarterback was worth dating. However, that's who am I to judge, Femi, right? Who am I to go down that avenue, right? But I will say that Stafford Inc. is very determined, and Kelly is intimately involved. If you talk to anybody about Matthew Stafford, Kelly's name comes into the conversation. And I'm sure the Rams are going to have to deal with this. And in fairness to the Rams, look, they were worried about his elbow last year. Mm-hmm. And they did try to trade him. Matthew knows it. Kelly knows it. Everybody knows it, right? The Rams could deny it, but they were worried about committing $90 million to a guy who might have a bad elbow and can't throw the football. It's fair. That's a fair thing. They couldn't get any traction because the National Football League was worried about his elbow. Understandable, right? The Raiders could have traded for Matthew Stafford for a 6th-round pick, but they were worried about his elbow, so they didn't do it. Because everybody was worried about it. If the Raiders would have traded for Matthew Stafford last year, put him on their team with Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, that staff might still be there. They didn't. All right, so now it's time that these contracts are coming up, and all these quarterbacks want a little bit more. And I think Kelly, being as determined as she is to get what she wants, I think there's going to be some pressure here. So everybody was interested in the gossip about what Kelly did in college. I'm more interested in the cause and effect and how it's going to affect the contract negotiations.
I mean, the gossip is juicy stuff, though, isn't it? I
Well,
dated
I
the
mean,
backup quarterback.
well, I think you tip your cap to Kelly because she knew what she wanted and she went for it.
Yeah.
And she's a determined girl, and you got to love that. You got to love that. And I think that she's determined to protect her man. And when he goes home, I think what we as fans don't realize when players go home, that they have somebody's talking to them too, not just their agent. You just don't have the business and the home life. Those two things kind of come together. And I think ultimately the Rams are going to have to do something. We put that poll out last week and we asked the question, and somebody wrote in that the Rams could easily, that they were the team that were going to have to, Matthew Stafford was going to get done first. Now, what I think will happen is a slight modification. I don't think it'll be over the top, but I do think they're going to try to make Kelly happy.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly Stafford learning from Wolf of Wall Street. The scene that says, sell me this pen. He's like, well, how about you write your name down? Well, I don't have a pen. Boom, supply and demand. You got to create that urgency. Got to create urgency if you want stuff to get done. We could all learn a thing or two from that. So we'll see if Matthew Stafford can get a contract done at some point. All right, on the other side, Vinnie Bonsignore joins us from the Las Vegas Review-Journal to break down the Raiders here on the Lombardi Line.
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. Now here is your host, Femi Abebefe, on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
All right, we know the NBA is in the rearview mirror. The NHL will be done after tomorrow night. So what time is it? It's time to get ready for the NFL season. Our NFL betting guide is dropping this Thursday, and you have to become a VSiN Pro subscriber to get your hands on it. You're going to get just in-depth profiles of every team, advanced stats, proven betting systems, and betting trends that you'll have all the tools you need to bet this season smarter. Plus, our experts share their top bets on season win totals, futures, and props, giving you the insights you need to get ahead of the action. You got to go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber, but here's the catch. You must use promo code Lombardi. It's usually $240 for a year. Now it's $199 for 13 months. How about that deal that they're hooking you up with? You get all the insights and everything that you can to become a better. Help us help you. And go ahead and take advantage of it. VSiN.com/subscribe, promo code Lombardi. This is the Lombardi Line here on the DraftKings Network. Michael Lombardi out on the road here, hanging out with us on the West Coast. Femi Abebefe holding things down here in Las Vegas. And joining us now on the Progressive Guest Line, he covers the Las Vegas Raiders for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. It's the one and only Vinnie Bonsignore, who's waking up with us here on the Lombardi Line. Vinnie, thank you for hanging out with us. And we'll start off with this quarterback competition. We were discussing this a little bit earlier in the show. Michael seems to think that it's Gardner Minshew's job to lose. He should be able to get the starting job by week 1. Is that how you see it, or can Aiden O'Connell make a realistic run at this thing and potentially upset the apple cart?
I do actually see it the other way. I think it's Gardner Minshew's job to lose. I think the Raiders would prefer that he's the starting quarterback. He still has some ceiling left. I think they want to see what that ceiling is. I think Gardner Minshew's more of a emergency situation just in case Aiden doesn't take that step forward, and then you do have a starting caliber quarterback, you quote unquote, in Gardner Minshew to kind of save the day. Or if Aiden O'Connell goes down at any point in the season, you have somebody that's proven that he could step in and play at a reasonable level in Gardner Minshew. So I think this is Aiden's job to lose. But the performance that we saw in minicamp, if anything can be really read in that, neither showed that they're ready yet. If the Raiders were coming into the offseason hoping that one or the other quarterback was going to take a step forward and kind of declare themselves as the starter going into the season or training camp, that certainly didn't happen.
Well, I mean, it's surprising you give a quarterback $15 million to be the backup. That's a little bit overpriced, though. That's what led me to believe this. But I think your critique of the quarterback position is going to continue. I think ultimately when you have two quarterbacks, as the great John Madden said, you have none. And I just wonder where the Aiden O'Connell love comes from, Vinny. When you watch him last year, he didn't complete a pass after the first quarter in the Kansas City game. He couldn't complete passes in any game, really. They couldn't score a point against the Minnesota Vikings. When he played against defenses that moved around and created some different looks at the line of scrimmage, it was very difficult. So where is this positivity about Aiden O'Connell coming from? Because it wasn't on the tape last year.
Yeah, I think that they're going to give him some allowances for it was his rookie year. He was thrown into, a rather difficult set of circumstances given what happened midway through the season. For every bad game that he had against the Minnesota Vikings and the Kansas City Chiefs, he also had pretty decent games. The Chargers game, he bounced back after that Vikings game to have a pretty good game in that game. There were games where he did well as well. And if you really look at the statistics between he and Gardner Minshew, they're almost line by line exactly the same. That doesn't say that, that's not to say that either is a championship caliber quarterback, but the fact is they're both relatively the same in terms of the statistics. Now they do it a little bit differently, and that could give one the edge of the other over the other, when it's all said and done. But they're basically the same level of quarterback in terms of production. And I'm with you. I think this is a situation that's going to carry over into the regular season, because as opposed to your normal circumstance where you have a decided starter and somebody that's decidedly better than the second option, where that makes it difficult to make the decision. Okay, well, our starter's not playing well. Let's go to the backup, knowing that like a Derek Carr to a Nathan Peterman. You're probably not going to make that move because Peterman is that further down compared to a Derek Carr. In this case, you have two quarterbacks that are relatively the same from a statistics standpoint. So if either doesn't take this job and run with it at the beginning of the season, you could probably see them making a change at some point, maybe 4 weeks into the season. So to me, this is a job that, they'll declare a starter coming out of training camp, but really it's about who performs during the season. And if the starter coming out of training camp isn't capable of doing that, I don't think they'll waste 1 second moving to the second option.
This is the Lombardi Line. Michael Lombardi, Femi Abebefe. We're hanging out with Vinnie Bonsignore here on the Progressive Guest Line. Vinnie covers the Las Vegas Raiders for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Vinnie, is this offensive line good enough to give either of these guys a chance once we get to the fall?
It's unknown at this point. I mean, you can only tell so much from minicamp. They're not wearing pads. It's kind of unfair, actually, for the offensive line against the defensive line that's just kind of running past them sometimes, and you don't get a real feel for that. When the pads come on, that's when you'll get a real feel. I do think that on paper it has a chance to be better than last year's group. I think Thayer Munford could be an upgrade over Jermaine Illuminor, and certainly Jackson Powers Johnson, who they drafted out of Oregon. They're moving him to left guard. I think that he taking over at left guard, Dylan Parham moving over to right guard. I think that has a chance to make this offensive line better. So right now it's an unknown, but I would not be surprised if this offensive line settles down and turns out to be a pretty good unit. Not a great unit, but a good unit.
And so talk to me about the defensive backfield. The corner situation, which has always been a little bit of a concern for the Raiders. Jack Jones comes over, and Pierce had him at Arizona State, kind of played well, but there's always off the field issues with Jack Jones. So how does that secondary look and shape up after minicamp?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit better than what First of all, you've got Nate Hobbs and you got Jack Jones. If, as you say, Jack Jones toes the line in terms of the off-field stuff and the maturity stuff, that's a big if, no question about it. But if he does, I think they've got a really good perimeter cornerback. I think Nate Hobbs, when he's healthy, is one of the better slot cornerbacks in the NFL, and somebody that they can strategically use as a chess piece defensively, can line up wherever you need him in terms of that. The big question is, does Jacorian Bennett re-win the starting job opposite Jack Jones, or is it going to be Brandon Faison or DeCamerion Richardson, or do they go out and get somebody in the free agent market? I think preferably Jacorian Bennett takes that job. You got Brandon Faison then in the rotation, and you start melding in the young kid DeCamerion Richardson. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's a position that they ultimately invest in again in that free agent market right now, whether it's as a starter or somebody that can provide some depth or some rotational minutes. But with that defensive line, and this is the Raiders' hope, with the defensive line as good as it is, they feel like they can bring along a Jacorian Bennett or put a Brandon Faison in there, and they would acquit themselves well enough in conjunction with everything else that they have on this defensive line. But if Jack Jones is good, I think he's going to be one of the better, not one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, but somebody that I think is going to open up a lot of eyes. This guy has all the tools. It's just, as you said, Mike, is he going to be able to remain and toe the line in terms of the off-field stuff?
Yeah, so certainly like the defensive line that you mentioned there. Max Crosby, of course, an all-pro. Christian Wilkins, awesome in the free agency pickup. Malcolm Kuntz came on at the end of last season here. But the win total, Vinny, is set at 6.5. If you were a betting man, would you go over or under that number based on all the things that you've said about the Raiders this upcoming season?
Man, probably over. I think this has a chance to be a 9-win team, but it's a 9 to 10-win team. I really like the roster. When you look back at the Josh McDaniels era and the Dave Ziegler era, they actually did a pretty good job getting this thing back on track in terms of the drafting, some of the young kids or some of the free agent signings that they made. So this roster is in really good shape. It's all predicated on what level of quarterback play that they get. And to me, even if they do get quarterback play that helps them win 9 or 10 games, I still think that this time next year we're going to be talking about probably a different quarterback, for the Raiders. I don't really see a scenario where somebody just plays so well among Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, where at the end of the season, even if they do make the playoffs, where the Raiders aren't looking to improve at quarterback. So it really is predicated on what happens at quarterback, and can you get a fairly high level from either of them, and if so, I think they'll be in pretty good position to win 9 or 10 games. If not, then that 6.5 wins looks pretty accurate as well.
Right. Yeah, it's always hard. It's hard, Vinny, to get 10 wins if the quarterback doesn't play at an elite level, especially in the fourth quarter when it has to happen. But we shall see. Thank you for visiting us today, Vinny. Great stuff here.
All right, guys. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
That's awesome. So that's Vinnie Bonsignore, covers the Raiders for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. He joined us on the Progressive Guest Line. Based on what he said, I mean, if this quarterback thing sounds like the disaster that he made it out to be, I'd be looking to maybe bet the Raiders to finish last place.
There's no chance. I mean, he laid it out. You're counting, which he didn't see in the minicamp. So by not being in the minicamp, it's going to be hard to see it in the regular season.
All right, JVT joins us next to break down the NBA here on the Lombardi Line.
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. Now here is your host, Femi Abebefe, on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
If you haven't already, make sure you check out our VSiN senior NBA analyst, Jonathan Von Tobel's mock draft betting picks. It's on the website. It's right on the cover, VSiN.com. It's his 1.0 of the mock draft. Maybe we'll get a 2.0 by this time Wednesday night for the first round of the NBA draft. Check it out today and all the other stuff that we have at VSiN.com. Welcome back. This is the Lombardi Line. Femi Abebefe, Michael Lombardi here on the DraftKings Network. Thank you to Vinnie Bonsignore, who joined us in the last segment, covers the Raiders for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. We mentioned him, Jonathan Von Tobel. He joins us now here on the Progressive Guest Line, waking up with us to talk a little NBA draft, and maybe we'll sprinkle in some NBA free agency stuff as well. JVT, good morning. I want to ask you this question, because as it stands right now, the draft a few days away, is now still the time to be going big game hunting for some big prices to potentially go number one overall, or is the picture starting to get at least a little bit more clear?
Yeah, I mean, the picture's starting to get a little bit clearer, especially near the top, Femi, right? So if you're going to use your term big fish hunting near the top, you're going to have a little bit of a difficult time, right? So, for example, the sexy name that has been tied to Atlanta in a lot of reports have been Donovan Clingan. He's gone from as high as 15-1 to the second option now, plus 170 in the last few weeks. So, you're kind of out there. It does seem that all intel is saying it is either Risacher or Clingan. They're the number one spot. The odds, I think, now currently reflect that. If you wanted to go out of left field and go, I don't believe anything. I don't believe that Sarr is tanking a stock on purpose. He still has not worked out by all accounts for the Atlanta Hawks yet, but I still believe that he's going to go number one overall. That would be your only option there, plus 450, but nothing has really connected him to the Atlanta Hawks, at least the outward information that we have consumed. Number two, right? We got a report on Friday that Sarr was going to be a lock, is the term that Jonathan Givony used for Washington at number two. Well, he went from minus 140 on Friday over the course of our show on VSiN Primetime to minus 550 by the time we got off of the air to to go with the second overall pick. So again, there, if you wanted to go take a shot at Zachary Richer, who's widely considered to be the second overall prospect or best prospect by some measure, maybe that's going to be the case. But again, all the intel's gone. And we can even go to the third overall pick, which Reed Sheppard seems to be a very good fit for the Houston Rockets. If the Rockets make that pick there, then of course it would be, it seems, Reed Sheppard. Problem is, we're down to even money now for Reed Sheppard to go there. He was 2-1 just 2 days ago. And in that one, I would argue, if you wanted to go again with a plus price, the Memphis Grizzlies, by all accounts, freaking love Donovan Clingan. And 3 would be the spot to potentially move up to go and get him if he's still available. You could take the shot at plus 275. So I think at the top, it's a little bit hard. And then the problem with that is once you get past like 5, then all of a sudden it becomes all hell breaks loose and who knows what the hell is going to happen because all these teams draft on not on need, but on how they view a prospect, and it becomes a little wonky there forward.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked all my friends in the league who the first pick is, and I've gotten 3 different answers. I've gotten Sarr, I've gotten Klingman, I've gotten Richer, right, exactly. I've gotten all 3 of those different answers. But the guy I want to focus on, the other guy that's all over the board is Reed Sheppard. Some love him, and some don't think he's going to be very good. Some think he'll make it to San Antonio. What's your read on that one?
So I think it sounds like, Michael, from everything I've taken in, it's really dependent on what the Houston Rockets do at number 3 in that do they trade out of that spot or do they stay there? Because the Rockets, by all account, want to move that pick. Again, this is all information that's out there that we've been consuming. And so if that is true, then any one of those teams could come up, take whoever they want. Could be Sheppard, but it could be somebody else, i.e. Clingan, if he slips down to number 3. And then Sheppard's ground starts to slip a little bit. But I would think that he doesn't get much farther past 4 because the Spurs do need a guard. They were looking for a guard. Sheppard could be that guy. He was just 50% three-point shooter at Kentucky. He's a good defensive piece. I think his range is probably at the most at 5, and I think it's in there. But from everything that I've consumed, it sounds like 3 to 5 is probably the path where you're going to get Sheppard. I don't think he falls much past it because there's a lot of people that have him as high as the 2nd overall prospect and the 5th as overall prospect. But he's definitely in that range on a lot of big boards, and I would not expect him to fall out of the top 5 by any measure.
We're hanging out with Jonathan Von Tobel, VSiN senior NBA analyst. Also check him out on VSiN Primetime Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 Eastern Time, as well as VSiN.com. JVT, so then why do you think Reed Sheppard is the favorite as it stands right now? Because it sounds like Sarr is beloved by the Washington Wizards. He wants to go there at 2. Yep. Sounds like you mentioned every indication gives you the Hawks like Donovan Clingan, and he's right now, his price has moved all the way down to plus 190. Why is Reed Sheppard still the favorite? Is there a chance that something weird happens at the top? Maybe there's a trade or anything like that we have to kind of factor in here? Like, why is he the favorite at odds-on price?
Well, I think first off, I mean, it's because notable draft nicks like Jonathan Givony still have him mocked to go at number 1, right? So that's always going to influence the market of where we're at. But the other part is when you read all of this about Atlanta, every connection being made to Clingan, it's twofold, right? It's, hey, they love Donovan Clingan, but they're not sure if they want to take him number 1 overall. And so that's where you get into the prospect, okay, like, well, is he not worth the first overall pick? And instead, should we take the best player available, which would be Zachary Richer by default? Because, again, they have not worked out Alexander Sarr. It seems to be a case of positional value and where you're picking in the draft is why that we have kind of this stuck on Richer at number 1. But I would argue, and we talked to Bobby Marks on Friday from ESPN, former Nets general manager, he brought up a great point to an extent, which was, look, you're not drafting for fit because in 2 years, the guys on your roster aren't going to be there. I think for most teams that makes sense, but most teams aren't picking number 1 overall with playoff aspirations, and that's Atlanta, right? They have Trae Young, they have DeJounte Murray, they have a team that they think can make it inside of the very least the top 10 and into a playoff scenario, and who knows what happens from there. Clingan's the guy with the highest floor that can hit the ground running and fits the archetype of a player like Rudy Gobert, who Quinn Snyder played with, of course, or had on his roster when he was in Utah. So I think the fits are all there. It just seems that maybe there's some resistance to using the first overall pick on a rim protector like Clingan. But I'll say this really quickly. There was a report the other day, Kelly Uko, who covers the Houston Rockets, reported that the Rockets have Clingan at the top of their board. You can't, if you're Atlanta, get cute, it would seem, and trade past 4, because if that's going to be the case, it seems that there's intel out there that Clingan will be gone by the time he gets to the Rockets, and that's always going to be a pretty fascinating dynamic. But it does seem to be a case of positional value and picking at number 1, which is why we still have Richer there at number 1.
Let's talk Lakers, right? We discussed and opened the show about J.J. Redick, and frankly, I think way too much is being made about his inexperience. We've seen this happen in the NBA before where former players have gone on to have good coaching careers. But I think what we're missing here, and I love your commentary on this, is are we sure the Lakers are a good team? And
Right.
if LeBron takes $50 million, like, what does that leave for them to improve their team?
No, I completely agree with you, Michael. This is not a team that I think is currently constructed to win an NBA championship, and not even a championship in the Western Conference. I mean, look at the way the rosters stack up in the West in comparison with what we're looking at for the Los Angeles Lakers. When you have the Thunder, the Timberwolves, the Nuggets, the Mavericks, like we can go down the list of teams, and that doesn't even include, Michael, the teams that are on the rise. Houston is very close to being extremely competitive. The San Antonio Spurs are very close to being extremely competitive. You can find yourself in the West with 10, 11, 12 legitimate playoff teams, and you're looking around and going, all right, where do we stack up in all of this? And the problem is that you also have those championship aspirations, the delusions, if you will, of, no, we should be amongst the best. When they made it to the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago, it was the benefit of a very good run. The Memphis Grizzlies were beat to hell. They had no injuries. They got a really small Golden State team. We saw the difference between them and Denver then. We saw the difference between them and Denver this last year. So I'm with you. Like, to me, it doesn't make that big of a difference. I think Redick could be very good. I think Redick could probably add wins at the margins with the way that he can draw up out of timeout plays and all these sort of things, the blobs and the slobs and all those sort of stuff, right? But at the end of the day, where's your roster going to be when you start the season? And if you go down the path of going top heavy, we have a very good example in Phoenix of a team that went top heavy this last year, had no depth, and got their butts kicked in the first round by the Minnesota Timberwolves. I agree with you. It doesn't matter. Like, in terms of head coach, you got to improve the roster first.
The NBA free agency officially begins on June 30th for some of these unrestricted guys to sign. Where do you think Paul George is going to be playing once we get to the official tampering period?
I'm in line with the market, Femi. Market still got the Clippers as like a minus 250 favorite to retain him. I think that just makes the most sense. He wants to live in LA. They have the ability to give him the contract that he wants. You probably play a little bit of hardball, but the second he gets a legitimate offer from somewhere else, then you're probably going to match it, and you're going to, of course, accept him back on the Los Angeles Clippers. You're opening a new arena next year. You don't want to risk alienating him or Kawhi Leonard or any of that when you have such a big thing going for you in the next season. And by the way, we got a report the other day. I don't know how true this is. Michael might be able to speak on this, that Philly's waning in terms of their interest in Paul George. So maybe that's on the Philly side, or maybe they understand that, look, he probably is going to go back to Los Angeles Clippers, and we're better off pursuing OG Anunoby as opposed to Paul George. So I think at the end of the day, the big domino is Paul George, and I think he just remains with the Los Angeles Clippers.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me. Look, we know the 76ers are star hunting, but Paul George, you're basically going all in. And now, and if Shams reports it, one thing about Daryl Morey, the information does get out. Real quickly before we let you go, I know you're so good at basketball, but football. We just had Vinnie on from the Review Journal talking about the Raiders. Over 6.5 win total or under for you, JVT?
I would lean under. I don't know if you can go into a season with your quarterback room looking like that. Like, your defense is going to be good. Your skill positions are very solid. Your offensive line has depth, but the trigger man's got to have some level of skill. And Gardner Minshew was fine, but he wasn't great for Indianapolis. And Aiden O'Connell seems to be just Aiden O'Connell. I'd lean under, especially with the depth of that conference and, of course, their division itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where we both land for the silver and black. He is Jonathan Von Tobel. Make sure you check out all of his work. VSiN.com, VSiN Primetime, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 Eastern Time at the network, as well as all the NBA coverage. JVT, it's a big week, man. Good luck with all the NBA draft bets.
Thanks, JVT.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Good stuff there from Jonathan Von Tobel, who joined us on the Progressive Guest Line. We'll wrap up the show on the other side. It's the Lombardi Line here on a Sunday on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
This is the Lombardi Line with former NFL executive Michael Lombardi. Now here is your host, Femi Abebefe, on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back. This is the final segment of the Lombardi Line here on the DraftKings Network. Femi Abebefe alongside Michael Lombardi out here on the West Coast. Thank you to Jonathan Von Tobel. Joined us in the last segment, our VSiN senior NBA analyst. Check out all of JVT's work on VSiN Primetime, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 Eastern Time, as well as VSiN.com. We mentioned that JVT wrote up a mock draft for his best bets for this upcoming NBA draft. I can't wait for it. Like, we were talking about this earlier during one of the breaks. There's so many differing opinions on who might go number one overall, and then the trickle-down effect from that afterwards. I think it's going to be a fun night of the NBA draft. I love when there's the uncertainty. I think that's when it's the most entertaining.
Well, this is really going to be a hard draft for them to cover, ESPN and whomever, NBA draft and all that, because guys get picked by teams that are going to be traded. And because of the collective bargaining agreement, they can't technically announce the trade, but they end up doing it. And so we're going to get a situation where a team takes a player that doesn't fit for the team, and we're going to realize that he's going to get traded. And maybe it'll be at the pick. But I think this is the kind of draft where anything goes, but this doesn't necessarily line up in a linear fashion where, okay, this team picks this team picks that. We're seeing already with the Caruso trade, with Giddey to go into Chicago and Caruso going to Oklahoma City, we're starting to see a lot of action already, and I think the trades are going to heat up. When Shams came out and said that the Sixers have moved off of Paul George, and then you go to Twitter today and it's all about Paul George and the Sixers. So there's a lot of different opinions going on here. I just read one on Twitter where it's going to be Paul George and a sign and trade with bringing Tobias Harris back. I mean, who knows? I think this is one of those where we're going to have to react to what we know, not what we think.
You know, as a front office executive, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. You've been in the chair. The other front office executives all obviously have said stuff about this as well. Like when mock drafts come out and it says, hey, the mocks are either wrong or there's a little bit of a pressure. Do you like when there's this kind of uncertainty? Because do you think it's easier to then have like a more clear mind, or is it more difficult given the fact that the evaluations are all over the place on all these prospects that are coming out?
Yeah, well, I think what happens is we have a lot of unprofessional evaluations and then there's the professional, right? So let's just take, for example, Brady went on Colin Cowherd last week, and I don't know what he was doing. It was on Twitter, and people were just amazed that Brady's talking about the quarterback position. The disconnect between how to play quarterback and how it's reported to the actual what is a quarterback supposed to do and how it is played is so different. You know, it's so different. And so I think to me that void and understanding of it applies to all sports, and especially in the NBA. One of the things you know when you read about what Brad Stevens has done with the Boston Celtics is he basically went back to scouting inside out. He has a specific criteria for what he wants at point guard, what he wants at 2, 3, 4, 5, and then he made it all work. I mean, look, the guy did Red Auerbach-like things and being able to get Drew Holiday and Porzingis in there for basically nothing, and he got 2 first-round picks back. Think about that. Mm-hmm. And so this is so predicated on star power that people lose sight of. The NBA is about what can work as a collective team. And we don't talk enough about that. We just talk on draft day about this guy's a great player, but how does he fit? You know, where does he fit? What does he do? And how will his play help the other people become better players? That's always the question you have to answer when you're involved in team building. We talk about it on the GM Shuffle all the time, Vinnie. Mm-hmm.
100%. And I think that the Boston Celtics winning the title right now, I think is a really good indicator of what might become the NBA, the new NBA, what they wanted to accomplish with this collective bargaining agreement. Because this second apron tax is very punitive. Like, you have to pay a lot of money if you go beyond that second apron tax, to where building through the draft is more important than it ever has been in the NBA. Like, you can't just say, you know what, yeah, we can just screw it and let's trade 5 first-round picks to get this player. Let's trade this to get this player and build ourselves the super team. As JVT mentioned in the last segment, it's the teams that have the depth, the Minnesotas, the OKCs, the Bostons, the Dallas. Like, those are the teams that ended up having success this playoffs. The teams that were the super teams, like the Lakers and the Suns, and those older teams, they kind of crashed out early on. So, like, this is kind of the new NBA, and maybe it's going to be more parity driven. Maybe it's going to be more on team building and building the NBA draft throughout of just doing the whole let's get this free agency summit going and let's sign 2 stars in the offseason and call it a day.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you have to really be careful. And the other thing I want to alert people to is there is all these fake Twitter accounts out there. Like, I just got an alert from a fake Twitter account that the Dallas Mavericks have traded Tim Hardaway Jr. to the Sixers for Tobias Harris and a second-round pick. Like, I mean, like, you know, and this came from and it's all these fake accounts. So let's not react to the fake accounts too. I think that's another important message. That should be the betting tip right now: is don't react to fake accounts.
You got to be Mutombo. You got to block them all. You got to block them all. You got to block them all. That's what I do. Like, if I don't get the notification from Woj, Shams, or Chris Haynes or one of these other people, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it until I get that notification. So yeah, you got to block those guys because they're going to be out and about. The fake accounts this week, the fake accounts next next week when free agency really kicks off, it's all over the place, and it's unfortunate, but people, I guess, want to do it for engagement. I guess they get a kick out of it and a laugh out of it. Who knows? I've never been one of those people, so I guess I can't get inside of their minds, but that is definitely a reality. But yeah, I'm very excited for this NBA draft. Very excited to see what happens in free agency, what your Sixers do. Would you want someone like an OG Anunoby on the Philadelphia 76ers? Like, a terrific defender, but he has so much trouble staying on the court.
I mean, why would we take a guy that can't play healthy, that's never healthy? It just fits who we are, right? I mean, it just fits. I mean, you got
culture.
Can you imagine driving to the stadium, driving up the Atlantic City Expressway? I'm going to go to a game. Oh, Embiid's not playing tonight. Neither is Ojanobi. I mean, oh, great. I mean, I don't think Ojanobi's a great player. I love him, but you can't. Durability is part of ability too, and that's a big issue with him. Look, the Knicks, I think you made a great point. The Celtics tax is going to be really prohibitive. They're going to go over there, especially as they got other guys to get their contracts.
Yep.
So
the
second threshold tax, Tatum with a max deal. So it's going to be interesting to see how teams approach that and what is truly going to be the new collective bargaining agreement in terms of when this TV money starts to come in.
Do you think that's good for the league because clearly the NBA wants more parity. They don't want super teams anymore. They don't want that kind of style. They want kind of more balanced teams. But even if you draft really well, you sort of have to pick and choose which guy you extend because you don't want to go beyond that second apron tax there. Like, do you think that this is going to be good for the association, that teams will have at least a better chance to ultimately win the title?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I think one thing we've been proven is when do these super teams work? I mean, just ask the Phoenix Suns. When does it work? How many coaches are they going to go through, right?
Yeah, they just hired Budenholzer. Good luck to him. It's like all these coaches that they've ran through. Frank Vogel was one and done, even though Frank Vogel was a pretty good coach. But unfortunately, I guess someone had to pay the price for them not reaching their expectations this upcoming season here. We've got a couple minutes left. Any thoughts for you on what's going to happen? I know you're going to take a little bit of time off, but we got Giants Hard Knocks that's coming up July 2nd. We're excited for Giants Hard Knocks. How do you see this thing playing out here, HBO? I'm sure we'll talk before it actually officially airs, but this HBO off-season edition of the Hard Knocks is something that they've never done before.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. I think we're going to get the cover-up that they never were interested in a quarterback, that they run it all along, even though they didn't try to trade with the fourth team overall once May went off the board. Look, I think one of the things about Hard Knocks that you have to be very careful about from a team standpoint is to show that you know what you're doing, that you come across with a plan, with conviction, with leadership, right? Joe Shane's got to show that in the videos. He's got to show that he's in command, that he knows his team, that he has an idea of what he wants to do, and he educates the fans. Fans want to know that their general manager and their head coach are smart and they really know what to do. When Herm Edwards was sitting there pondering whether he was going to start Damon Hillard, or Brody Croyle at starting quarterbacks for the Chiefs, it's, the fans were like, we don't have a starting quarterback. What are you contemplating? It's the same thing at the Raiders. They don't have a starting quarterback. I know Vinnie said that they could get to 10 wins, but he also said they don't have a starting quarterback. Those two things don't go hand in hand. You don't want that. And I think, to me, that's going to be the interesting thing when we get into Hard Knocks, is how that all plays out, what it looks like, and how it moves forward.
Yeah, I think you reminded the Kansas City Chiefs fans of some dark times there when it was Damon Heward and Brody Croyle. But now it's Mahomes, and they're in the glory years, as they
nothing to worry about.
Just won another Super Bowl, and they're the favorites to go ahead and do so again in 2024. Before we head out of here, once again, make sure to participate on the poll at M Lombardi NFL. Which underdog to start Week 1 at quarterback will win the job this offseason? None of them, whereas Aiden O'Connell, J.J. McCarthy, and Drake May, none of them is the leading option right now at 30% there. But McCarthy and May tied at 25%, and then Aiden O'Connell is at 19%. The poll's up there for 11 more hours. Participate at it once again, M Lombardi NFL, and we'll see what the results end up coming out to be. I think it's none of them. I agree with the leading percentage.
I think it's none of the above. I think it's none of the above for sure.
And then we'll see what happens in training camp as the Raiders try to talk themselves into one of these guys starting Week 1. That does it for us here on the show. Michael, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. For our producer Elliot Bowman, Michael Lombardi, the entire crew behind the glass, we wish you all the best of luck with all the bets. The Handle with Matt Brown and Stormy Bontoni is coming up next.
Want to see who at VSiN is on a hot streak? Go to VSiN.com/picks to see all the selections and